So this might be the most recent comic I've talked about in a long time, but I really wanted to talk about Batman the First Night by Dan Jurgens, Mike Perkins, and Mike Spicer. Now, this is the latest installment in DC's Bat Label imprint, because Lord knows they don't use it to print any stories featuring any other characters unless Tom King's writing it, because why the fuck would they? And despite sounding kind of bitter about that, this is actually a lot of fun. This is a throwback period piece to Golden Age Batman, and not in the way that DC and even Marvel, for that matter, will approach throwback pieces where, they go back to the aesthetic of that era, but they keep a lot of the contemporary iconography that came long after that time period. Kind of like DC New Frontier with their approach to most of the Justice League, or just literally anything Spider-Man related that takes him back to high school, where they use a lot of the Ditko aesthetics, but they drive everything with Romita Sr.'s iconography and characters. This book really doubles down on being a Golden Age Batman story. There is no Alfred, there's no Batcave, no Batmobile, no Bat Signal, no Arkham Asylum, no Robin. Well, that last one's not a huge surprise. Typically, writers and artists avoid Robin like an Urbanite does religion when doing out-of-continuity Batman stories. Even in continuity for a while, it felt like DC was trying to distance Batman from Robin, really up until recently with the Chip Zdarsky run. But in this case in particular with The First Night, I don't think Robin's absence has anything to do with, quite frankly, Robin's gay and Batman's hardcore, so Robin doesn't exist in my hardcore Batman narrative. I think it's less that and more just the simple fact that Robin wasn't around yet during the era that this comic is homaging. And like I said earlier, the story itself is pretty fun. I have some issues with it, but overall I really enjoyed it. Apparently it's a retelling of a Golden Age Batman story, but I can't put my finger on which one it could be. If it is, it's not one of the obvious ones featuring Dr. Death, or the Chemical Crime Syndicate from Detective Comics 27, or the Mad Monk, or Hugo Strange and the Monster Men. If it's not one of those, then I don't know which pre-Robin, pre-Joker Golden Age Batman story it could possibly be. But in any case, the story is fairly straightforward. Batman versus zombie mobsters, which even superficially sounds really fucking cool. And I don't want to give too much away because this is a mystery. It's a classic Batman detective type story. And a very subversive twist. Gotham is almost completely corrupt. Commissioner Gordon is like the one city official who's worth a damn, and he's just trying his hardest to keep the city from swallowing itself like a black hole. And executed prisoners from Blackgate Prison, all of them mobsters, are seemingly coming back from the dead and killing notable city officials. And that's like the bare bones overall plot, but there's really three stories being told here. The zombie mobsters being one. The other is Bruce Wayne and his relationship with Julie Madison, another notable Golden Age Batman character. For those of you who don't know, Julie Madison was the first love interest that Bruce Wayne ever had in the comics. And there's the third story with Batman and this rabbi, because it's 1939 and Dan Jurgens wants to talk about Nazis. Which, that's pretty unavoidable, telling a story set in that time period, but this is where my problems lie with the book. So, Dan Jurgens makes a big to-do about America's reaction to Hitler's rise to power, and the Nazis taking over Europe, and the American Nazi movement and its impact on Jewish American citizens. But none of it really has anything to do with the overall story. It's sort of just there, and it's very disconnected from everything else in the comic. Because the Julie Madison subplot with her film production being shut down ties directly into the Great Depression, which itself plays a major role in the overall plot with Gotham City going to hell because of the stock market crash. I don't know, I just thought that the stuff with the rabbi and the synagogue was gonna go somewhere, and it doesn't. Which is unfortunate, because I think you can do a lot with it. You can play with Bruce Wayne's Jewish heritage on his mother's side, because I'm pretty sure the Kane family is Jewish. Also, the Nazi Party was extremely influential among American aristocratic circles, which is brought up here, but nothing of note is done with that little historical tidbit. Again, it's just there, and nothing is really done with those ideas. And that kind of bothered me with this otherwise really good Batman story. But that aside, I thought everything else was great. I love the voice that Dan Jurgens has for Bruce Wayne. He's not writing the standard bratty, obsessive, incel-light, man-child Bruce Wayne that a lot of writers default to when approaching an early years Batman story. This Bruce Wayne is eccentric, but self-aware enough to know that what he's doing is extremely unorthodox. But Batman is not an outlet for Bruce's bloodlust. You know, it's not a way for Bruce to get back at the world with his anger issues after, the trauma of watching his parents die. Like, Bruce in this is refreshingly level-headed, because even though he knows what he's doing is crazy, he's doing it out of a sense of genuinely wanting to help people. And he's not combative or egocentric and insecure about it either. And I think part of that comes from the lack of Alfred in this story. I think the absence of Alfred relieves Bruce from that Oedipal adolescent tension that we often get in a lot of early years Batman stories, especially a lot of the newer ones. Here, he's just living in self-imposed isolation, but he's still socially functional, which again, was just weirdly refreshing to have in a Batman story. And I also just think it's really funny that somehow the most isolated, lonely take on Batman somehow presents one of the most emotionally mature depictions of Bruce Wayne. Like, come on, there's just something really funny about that to me. Which, to be fair, is in keeping with the Golden Age take on Bruce Wayne. If you go back and read those Golden Age Batman comics, Bruce Wayne is like a person who is social, and even depicted as being sociable. Like, this is not a guy who schizophrenically refers to himself as Batman in his own head and divorces his identity as Bruce Wayne from his persona as Batman. He's literally just a guy who sees that there are glaring infrastructural issues in the city that cannot be rectified through conventional means, and that's where Batman comes from. I don't know. I really like Dan Jurgens' take on Bruce Wayne. It actually makes me want to see what Dan Jurgens can do with a mainline Batman story, because for as long as he's been writing comics, I can't think of too many, really if any, Batman comics he's written. He's done a lot of Superman. In fact, I think he's written the most Superman comics of any living writer, but I don't think he's done a lot of Batman, which is a shame, because he writes a damn good Bruce Wayne. Everything with Julie Madison felt really interesting to me. The entire point being made with her character is drawing a parallel between Bruce and the world of theater. Like, everyone is, they're all putting up an act. Everyone wears a mask. There's a moment that I really liked when Julie and Bruce are having breakfast, and she mentions how the guy that she's always hanging around isn't actually her boyfriend. She is his beard, so to speak. And later on in the book, when Julie finds out that Bruce is Batman, slight spoilers, I guess, she gets it. And there's no drama surrounding her trying to change him. She just gets it. Just like Bruce understands her relationship with her friend. There is an exchange, however, where she questions Bruce holding a gun, and it's an enforcement of the no-kill rule, which Golden Age Batman never really had. And Batman doesn't really kill anyone in this book either, and there's even a monologue that Bruce has about his father's hatred of guns after performing surgery on a bystander who was wounded in a shootout between cops and gangsters, and that's the event that causes Thomas to loathe guns with a passion, so much so that he doesn't even go hunting anymore, which was sort of taboo for aristocrats back in that day. And that's where Bruce's aversion to using guns comes from, which is interesting because usually it's the trauma of watching his parents die that makes him hate guns. And if I'm going to be honest, I actually think I prefer the explanation here a little better, Having Bruce's worldview surrounding guns come from an instance in Thomas's life rather than his death gives the no guns, no killing rule a little more impact, in my opinion. But now I'm getting sidetracked. But back to Julie. I do wish that more was done with her. And that's part of the reason I don't like the rabbi subplot. I feel like she gets lost to make way for the rabbi, but more could have been done with her. I mean, I still really liked what she brought to the story. I just wish she had more to do, that's all. As far as the art goes, I really like Mike Perkins and Mike Spicer. I think their artwork fits the comic really well. And I appreciate that DC went with an art style that wasn't obviously pulp inspired, like a Phil Noto or a Greg Smallwood or a Cliff Chang, who, by the way, all of which would do an amazing job on a Golden Age pulp style Batman comic. But what I like about Perkins and Spicer is that the level of realism to their art gives the story a very cinematic film noir kind of tone, even though it's in color. Which, by the way, I think they could have totally gotten away with giving this book monochromatic coloring. But because Mike Spicer is such a dynamic colorist, I understand not feeding into that impulse. The muted, grimy colors give off an atmosphere of miasmic uncleanliness. Great Depression era Gotham feels dirty. Batman feels dirty whenever he's in costume. It's a very dirty looking comic, and I think Mike Spicer does an excellent job giving that feel to it with his colors. And I'm not 100% sure if this was intentional or not, but the face model that Mike Perkins is using for Bruce Wayne looks dead-ass like David Mazzucchelli's Bruce Wayne from Batman Year One, who I'm pretty sure is modeled after Gregory Peck, so that's a neat little callback. But, you know, the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm sure it has to be intentional. That is just too specific to be a coincidence. Also, each issue opens with a spread of newspapers and magazines covering Commissioner Gordon's desk, and each of the headlines are a reference to classic Golden Age Batman stories, and I thought that was a really nice touch. But yeah, in a time where Batman just feels painfully overexposed, I had a lot of fun with this, particularly because it was genuinely something different. Like, whenever people say, "We're gonna take Batman back to his roots," what usually gets crapped out is some generic, not as good wannabe Batman Year One Long Halloween type story. But this actually took the character back to his roots, and it actually explored Golden Age era Batman, but through the lens of contemporary comic book storytelling. And it was pretty fun. This definitely gave me vibes of the 1940s Batman serials, but, like, significantly less racist against the Japanese. And it's not straight up Golden Age Batman, primarily because Bruce Wayne still has that no-killing rule, which comes a little later in the Batman mythology. But I like the reasoning for why Bruce doesn't kill or use guns, so it gets a pass in that regard. That said, I would like to see someone attempt to do a Golden Age Batman story where Bruce is running around and just mowing people down like John Wick in a batsuit. Like, just literally make it The Shadow, but with Batman. I think that would be pretty fun. Also, just pretty funny because Batman started off as a blatant ripoff of The Shadow. I will say, as much as I appreciated this as a narrative experiment, I can't shake the feeling that this is exactly what a public domain Batman comic is going to read like, and maybe this is DC trying to get ahead of the inevitable wave of public domain Batman stories that are surely coming down the pipeline, assuming we're all still here because we found a way to avoid World War III, or in America's case, the Second Civil War. Because that's the only reason I can think of as to why DC would print a Batman story that lacks all of the iconography of Batman's lore, and just limits the story to what was available in Batman's first year of publication. And I can definitely see more comics in this universe being printed as a way to discourage other people from making public domain Batman stories, because, look, realistically, there's only so much you can really do with that first year's worth of Batman mythology. That said, Superman's the one who enters public domain first, so I don't know why DC would prioritize a glorified public domain Batman story over a public domain Superman story. But, I don't know, maybe I answered my own question there. God, I hope this James Gunn Superman movie changes DC's trajectory, because this is getting a little tedious. But if you've read Batman the First Night, what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? If you haven't, do you plan on reading it, despite collective Batman fatigue? Let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share, support the channel. And if you want to see more content like this, all you gotta do is subscribe. I am the Mystical Green Beanie. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care, guys. Adios.